Hey, what is up ladies and gentlemen, I'm Piglet here once again, and I'm from the likes of the Maxi Toys videos, and ladies and gentlemen, Kirby's now finally back in new forms of not only to be on a console game, ever since during the likes of in Kirby 64 The Crystal Shards, but also by the forms of our YouTube channel as well. So yes, after the forms of the releasing of the forms of Kirby Mouse Attack, and even Mario has recently finished up with Kirby Mouse Attack for almost 2 months ago at this point, for the Nintendo DS, so I thought I might as well able to actually finally come back into the forms of some more Kirby action in the forms of Kirby's Epic Yarn for the Nintendo Wii. Now this game did first came out in the forms of in 2010 for North America and Japan, but it wasn't until in 2011 that in our countries anyway, have to wait until when it's being released in 2011. I think this the reason why is because, well, they need to get ourselves the England localization going, because even then, we'll explain more on that as soon as we're able to actually proceed to this game, because for now, as you can see, this game utilizes the single player mode or 2-player co-op play if you want to get your friend over and want to help you out, but honestly, I might as well able to go for the game for myself. So even then, we're about to get started right there, and as you can see on my first file, I've almost finished up the entire game, not all of them per se, but even then though, I'll discuss more into that as soon as we actually proceed to this game, because for now, we'll jump into file 2 quickly, and hopefully I'm actually be really looking forward to able to jump to this game. So even then, here we go with Kirby's Epic Yarn for the Nintendo Wii, and of course, we couldn't even leave out with the opening cutscene.
Welcome to Dreamland, a kingdom famous for peace and quiet. It's the perfect little land, if you like that sort of thing. Lately there have been rumors of a caped sorcerer going around, turning people into yarn. That's right, yarn. One day, Kirby saw his favorite food, a bright red tomato on top of a bush. I bet it's yummy, but when Kirby tried to eat it, a caped sorcerer appeared. My name is... Hey, what are you doing? Stop that! No! That's my magic Metamato! Kirby gulped the Metamato right down. Just then, a white sock around the sorcerer's neck began to glow. Then it sucked Kirby up. This grass feels funny, Kirby thought. It feels like trousers. And to Kirby's surprise, he saw that his entire body was made out of yarn. Then he saw a yarn monster chasing a blue yarn boy. Somebody help me! Kirby tried to swallow the monster up, but the air went right through his body. Kirby wondered what he should do. Suddenly, Kirby transformed into a car. He drove away with the boy and left the monster behind to eat his dust. Apparently, that strange Metamato gave Kirby the power to seamlessly transform into a car, and who knows what else.
So from that cutscene, well, we managed to able to come across into the forms of the new character introduced in the forms of the Kirby universe, and only the appearance of that particular title. Thanks for saving me. What's that? You say you're from another world? Well, from Dreamlands that is. Which, even I know, yeah. Wow, welcome to Patchland. You just stick with me, and I'll show you the ropes. This is my castle, so feel free to look around here as much as you want. Because, you know, it's actually the first time we're going to be exploring by the forms of Patchland, apparently. So this is the forms of the actual hub world of any kind. Very similar to how it does it in Kirby's Adventure of all things. We're going to be able to actually explore for, quite a bit, but I don't think we can able to actually explore the actual, hub worlds just yet for the time being, because the game encourages you to able to deal with a tutorial level by the forms of Patch Castle. And as you can see on the right side of the forms of what the level's showing, there are a whole bunch of collectibles that we can collect, like the forms of the bead system, which we'll get into that as soon as we proceed to the game, streaks, and especially notable for treasures, which even then though, just like in the forms of Ever Since in a Great Cave Offensive, from Kirby Superstar, and especially noticeable by the forms of these treasure chests that you get from Kirby and the Amazing Mirror, and even especially noticeable for Kirby Mouse Attack, which even then though, the noticeable differences this time around though is the fact that you do not even to actually get yourselves a Kirby stomach system in the forms of in Kirby Mouse Attack. So anyways, this is how Kirby's Epic Yarn plays like. It plays very, very differently than any other Kirby games at this point, because from the start though, you have no longer going to be access to the forms of copy abilities. What you can do instead is the forms of how the fact that, as you can see, Kirby can able to actually use the actual Yarn Whip. Which even then though, in order to actually press that, or even just trying to activate that ability, is to able to actually press the 1 button, because as you can, if you couldn't tell already, this game is fully controlled with the new forms of the Wii Remote horizontally, just like the new forms of how it does it in any other 2D platformer games out there, like the forms of New Super Mario Bros. Wii, Warrior Lands The Shake Dimension, Klonoa for the Nintendo Wii, and all that kinds of stuff when it comes to 2D platformer games, including the likes of the NES games as far as that's been concerned with. So, and as you can see how the fact that the graphical style, especially noticeable the presentation, looks very, very gorgeous, especially if it's on the Nintendo Wii, even though it looks a little bit more, I don't know about you, but even then though, forget what I just said. But anyways though, it looks very, very good, even especially on the Nintendo Wii title, especially it's all fabric based. But even then though, as you can tell, because this is the forms of Kirby's Epic Yarn, so everything else is entirely made out of fabric and all wools, strings, all over the place. Even then though, it feels very adorable to look at too, which even then though, because as you can see there, not to mention with the forms of the absence of the forms of the copy abilities in mind, you don't have the ability to able to actually hover or even fly to yourself up towards the skies. What Kirby can do instead is the forms of, as you can tell, he can able to actually glide down with the forms of the parachutes, which even then, that'll become very useful when we get to the later portions of the level. In fact, also, was another great thing about the forms of this game in particular is that the music is so atmospheric as well. Well, not so much atmospheric, but more peaceful and a little bit more whimsical, anything like that. And also, it's very, very adorable to listen to. Especially noticeable how the fact that, well, you know. And as you can see, we've managed to collect one of those 3 treasure chests. Well, 2 of them are essentially one of those collectibles, and the 3rd and final one will always have to be the actual CDs you can collect. Which even then, we'll get to that as soon as we're able to proceed to this game. So, in order to actually finish the level in Kirby's Epic Yarn is the fact that, as you can see, we need to use the forms of the actual whip ability, and then you can able to actually ring the bell, and then if you actually can able to actually aim this thing at the right point, then you would able to actually get the actual highest amount of beads you can collect, based on for what the actual sections you're going to be aiming for. Like, as you can see, I've actually recently aimed by the forms of the red star section. Means I can get even more beads as much as I want to. So, that's very cool altogether. So, I believe there's going to be a next cutscene here.
Thanks for your help, the Blue Yarn Boy said. Not that I needed it. I'm Prince Fluff. Ever since Yin Yarn the Sorcerer ripped Patchland into 7 pieces, you just can't go anywhere without running into these horrible... But Fluff was interrupted when they were attacked by a huge 3-eyed blob of yarn. Yuck! Stop it! But before the blob could eat Prince Fluff, Kirby transformed and smashed it to smithereens in a most spectacular fashion. Among the little blob bits there was a shimmering piece of spiraling yarn. That's it, that's a piece of the magic yarn, Fluff exclaimed. This was what Prince Fluff had been looking for. Yin Yarn had stolen the magic yarn from Patchland. The yarn weaved its way into the fabric of the kingdom and stitched 2 pieces of Patchland together. What about the other pieces? I've got to find the rest of them. Kirby, always happy to help, decided to help his friend recover the missing pieces, and the two began their journey to stitch Patchland back together.
So yeah, this new character introduction by the forms of this particular game itself is actually known as Prince Fluff. See, Fernando, though, yeah, it's very interesting to say the least. It almost feels kind of like Kirby, except I believe he does have his crown on his head. See, Fernando, that makes it very obvious because his name was actually forms of Prince Fluff after all. Before we continue, there's actually this little hidden area we can actually entering for. Now we have to be by the forms of the Patch Plaza, which basically, as far as this particular section goes, it's basically a completionist list, which even then, that could be catalyzed as the forms of 6 sections, by the forms of percentages wise, but as you can see, that how the matter is though, I haven't got that much percentage for every single catalogs other than films, which even then though, as you can see, that 6 of those catalogs can be summarized as cast and stuff, as you've already obtained from treasures and stuff like that. And also by the forms of I believe fabric, which we don't have fabric at the moment, but we'll get to that until we get to proceedings to the game. And also these medals you've actually collected for the majority of the levels, so even though we've only got one of them by the forms of the gold medal. Tunes, or in this case music, which means you also managed to collect them by the forms of some of those treasures that you managed to be able to collect. And finally, films, which is basically you can able to rewatch some of these cutscenes again. Even though, out of all the actual catalogs we actually got into, so far 22% on films, it's actually gone ridiculously high. But even then though, we'll get to more cutscenes as soon as we're able to proceed to the story. But even then though, that the ultimate goal in Kirby's Epic Yarn is that we need to get those magical yarn stitched it back together in the entirety of Patchland. So that's our ultimate goal for this particular game, so yeah. Prince Fluff, what an unexpected surprise. Oh, and who might your friend here be? Lord Kirby, you say? He is visiting us from another world, you say? How exciting. My name is Dawn Woolley, and it is my pleasure to make your acquaintance. Lord Kirby is helping you save our beloved Patchland? Oh, that's just wonderful. I am the manager of Quality Court here. Please come inside for a moment, I insist. Yeah, they borrowed most of these sound effects from the forms of Warrior Lens The Shake Dimension, by the way, because even then, the developers of this game is actually forms of good feels, so yeah. Welcome to your new home. Well, at least, I suppose it's not much to look at just yet, but I would be honored to have one of the Prince Fluff's guests staying here. And from the get-go, we got ourselves a freebie item. A proper home must be properly furnished, but please accept this as a gift from me. Feel free to fresh your new place in whatever way you desire. We'll discuss the rent later. Apologize of that reading speech, by the way. Go ahead and enjoy the space. If you have any questions, I'll be around. Now, if you excuse me, I think I hear another prostitute tournament walking by outside. But again, I do apologize if my dialogue has gone a little bit more errant around here, most likely because of how the fact that, well, you know. So this is all you really do by the forms of the actual Kirby's flat. And then basically what you have to do is basically, there are 2 different ways you can able to actually deal with this. As you can see, we're actually going to be pointing our Wii remotes vertically because if you want to able to decorate your own room, then you can able to actually place your furniture, especially with wallpapers, especially when we get into later, or even fabrics as a result too. But if you think you've done, then you can able to switch over to the forms of horizontal position as well. So, again, there's nothing we can do at the moment right about now, because we've only just got started with the actual main game itself. So for now, let's go ahead and leave the forms of, you know, the actual patch castle and stuff like that. And we can able to move along to the forms of the true first world in the game, by the forms of Grassland. So, as you expected from any other Kirby games, is a typical grassy field type of level world like this. So even then, that it should be expected it will be the easiest world in the entirety of the game. So here we go with the forms of Fountain Gardens. So let's get into this. Obviously, how the fact of the matter is, though, is the fact that most of these cutscenes are fully non-narration, by the way. By the forms of it, though, between two different versions of the game, by the forms of the European version or the UK version of Kirby's Epic Yarn, then the likes of the North American version of Kirby's Epic Yarn does have two different voices for narrations. By the forms of, if you ever played this on the UK version, the narration voice was actually known for as Paul Vai-in, which I do apologize of his surname, by the way, but that's how I think it is to me, though. And his voice does very, very well, especially noticeable how the fact that, well, I feel sad how the fact that he sadly passed away, injuring the likes of him 4 years ago. By the forms of Paul, he's actually voiced as the actual narration of this game. If you want to look things up, then by all means you can look it up. And thankfully though, although conveniently enough though, is the fact that in the North American version in the forms of Kirby's Epic Yarn's narration, it was actually voiced by Dave White, aka David Frederick White. So even then though, that I found the narration to be a very cool way to able to actually notice the actual storytelling of the forms of how this game follows to be, which even then, speaking of which, we actually come across into the forms of a different villain for once, just like in the forms of how it does it in the forms of Kirby's Adventure, and especially noticeable by the forms of Kirby Superstar, and the forms of Kirby's Dream Land 2 and Kirby's Dream Land 3, and Kirby 64 The Crystal Shards, and even especially noticeable by the forms of Kirby and the Amazing Mirror, and especially noticeable by the forms of Kirby Mouse Attack as well. And we actually come towards by the forms of the introduction to Yin Yarn, which is basically more likely a sorcerer type of yarn witch of any sort, or even just like a somewhat of a, well, a new villain type or stuff like that. So I found that villain to be quite an interesting in terms of the actual new villains as far as this has been concerned with. But even then, no, we're not going to get into more on him until we actually proceed to the actual game. Regrettably, I know, but even then, no, we'll actually explain more on that as soon as we proceed on things. So yeah, whatever when this game has first announced back in during the likes of in E3 2010, I was actually quite hyped for this because of not only because it's been a long time since Kirby's now finally jumped into the actual home console entry, ever since in during the likes of in well, Kirby 64 The Crystal Shards. Well, technically this game is more likely a spin-off, more so to how it does in the forms of the main series of games, because obviously with the absence of the forms of there's no copy abilities and all that stuff, and even especially noticeable how the fact that you can't able to actually fly from any few moments noticing. And I do apologize about the fact that I keep on standing around like nothing else. It's nothing happens in the forms of my capture card recording section because it works very, very well still. But it's just that every time when I was trying to able to actually, oh no, it's been a long while since we're going to be able to actually doing some capturing footage of the forms of the Nintendo Wii system every nowadays. But for some reason, my TV starts to blink out for a few seconds, which is always a time that bugs me the most. But even then, no, that's not too much of a big of a deal. But even then, no, we've got ourselves the forms of those three treasures, as you can see there. Obviously, much like in any other Kirby games of series of games, is the fact that once again I'm going to be going after 100% completion. In fact, gaining 100% completion in every single Kirby games every nowadays is going to get a lot more longer to be able to actually complete through with 100% completions this time around, because Kirby's Epic Yarn is going to be filled with exploration, because even then though, because of the actual trophies we need to find, some of these beasts we can able to collect, and basically Kirby's Epic Yarn is going to be filled with the forms of collectible stuff, which even then though, by the forms of treasures, beads, which even then though, the bead system in this game can be acted out as for the forms of currency, by the forms of how the fact that when we get to the later portion of the game, that we're actually going to be using those beads by the forms of buying something from the shop, which even then though, we'll get to that as soon as we're able to proceed to this game, so don't worry, we'll get to that until that time. Oh, that's very cute, especially noticeable with these beaded, well, the heart-shaped beads, but unfortunately we've decided to able to murder those Waddle Dees as much as we can. Anyways though, So as you can see right there, we actually got ourselves the forms of these transformation sequences. Like the first transformation we actually come across into is the forms of the tank. And all we have to do is basically, it's very simple. We need to tilt the Wii remote in a corresponding direction. Depends if you actually just able to tilt it from left or right to actually be accuracy with the aiming with the actual tank. And press the 1 button to able to actually fire some missile attacks and all that stuff. And also pressing the 2 button to able to actually just hover the tank. See, but then though, aside from as far as I've mentioned about this countless amount of times, with the forms of the actual Kirby abilities absent, I don't really mind by the forms of the transformation sequences. These are still once again very cool to use though, especially noticeable because how this game is utilized the motion controls this time around though, compared to the likes of the touchscreen controls and all that stuff. This means you'll be able to do it like a lot of motion control based, even when we actually get into like a lot of transformations where we're about to get into later on, that some of them can be summarized as the forms of, some of them are tilted based, some of them are button mashed based, and some of them can be summarized as the forms of, well, we're not going to get more into that as soon as we get to the actual next couple of worlds later, but for now, we recently finished up with the forms of Fountain Garden. So, again, very simple and easy type of level. Very easy as far as the actual first level of the game goes. Well, not counting by the forms of a tutorial stage, but the forms of Patch Castle, mind you. So, there we go then. And every time you actually collect all 3 of those treasures in a single level, you also get yourselves like 100 beads each every time you actually collected one of those treasures, which even then, I believe if you collect all 3 of those treasures, it gives you like exactly 300 beads you've collect. So, that's very cool if you want to able to actually grind more of those beads as much as you wanted to, and you can able to actually go ahead and do so. Every now and then, is the fact that every time you finish off the main level, sometimes you get yourselves one of those, patches you might be able to actually place in with those specific environments. And sometimes, if you manage to place one of those patches in the forms of these current levels you want to get into, sometimes they do have these very, very cute cinematics, but in forms of butterflies are flying around in the forms of these whole bunch of flowers. So speaking of which, let's move on to the next level in the game, but in forms of flower fields. Not to be confused as the forms of Flower Fields world as far as Chapter 6 goes, in the forms of the original Paper Mario from the Nintendo 64. So because, you know, flowers is all over the place and all that stuff, so yeah, everything else is all accounted for basically. So in fact, funny story about this is the fact that, back into what I was saying, by the forms of my history of the forms of Kirby's Epic Yarn, I was actually pretty hyped for this game back in during E3 2010 because of, not only because we're going back into the forms of, not only because this is a completely different approach to Kirby, but also by the forms of the fact that it's been a long time that Kirby was now finally getting into the home console games instead of like the handheld installments. Well, up until when it gets to like 2014, that Kirby managed to able to actually come across into the forms of, you know, Kirby Triple Deluxe on the Nintendo 3DS. Although I probably won't get a count by the forms of Kirby Mass Attack on the forms of Nintendo DS, even though this is actually actually kind of think about it though, is the fact that the reason why that this game has gonna be delayed in the forms of back in 2011 in the UK instead of like the original release date in 2010, like the forms of how it does in North America and Japan, most likely because they need to get ourselves the UK localization going, because even then with the forms of these translations will go, and even some of these words make sense for the UK audiences, and even especially noticeable with something else for this recitable. So anyways though, if you walk around by the forms of those particular tilted flower platforms, as you can see there, if they manage to able to grow those little petals out, this means you get yourselves your beads that way. So that's a very cool way to able to also get those beads to begin with. So I digress. Man, I really love the music. It's so relaxing and so peaceful too. But I digress. So you can definitely tell how the fact that, unlike in any other Kirby games at this point, there is no extra lives in this game. Before what the forms of Super Mario Odyssey exist, and that game also doesn't have any of those extra lives. And also the same applies for how it does it in Sonic Forces as well, that between those two games, they don't have extra lives. And that could be the same applies for Kirby's Epic Yarn. I almost said Kirby's Star Allies for some reason, because that was the most recent Kirby game that have been released for about, let's just say almost 6 months for now. Which even then though, that I can't believe it's been about 6 months ever since when it first released it on the Nintendo Switch. So I was quite surprised about that. Oh yeah, I should probably point out right away is the fact that the more the beads you collect, as you can see on the top portion of the screen, not only does it gives you buddy forms of the actual beads counter, but every time you actually collect the majority of the beads before you're able to collect some, the more you collect them, the more medals you can get, buddy forms of, well, you start things off with the forms of bronze medal, and as soon as you collect even more, then you would able to get yourselves buddy forms of the silver medal. And if you get even more beads, you get yourselves the gold medal, which I was about to be doing for every single levels. I probably was able to do that, buddy forms of, I'm not sure about every single levels within the first attempt, but as soon as I'm able to actually revisit to this, these kind of levels again, or these kinds of levels again, then I would able to actually just try to able to accept the better attempt to able to actually go after these gold medals as soon as I possibly can. So, even though, with that being said though, is the fact that, yeah, there's not much else to really say about Kirby's Epic Yarn. It's very different from any other Kirby games as we, used to at this point, and, I was actually quite intrigued about this. Even then though, yeah, I really don't mind about that at all. Even though it's kind of a shame though that I managed to able to get this game quite ridiculously late back in June in 2011, because I'm still at UK at this point, even in United Kingdom. Because of that though, I was usually back in the day, I managed to able to spend my money, or in this case in Christmas money back in the day in 2011, I've managed to get myself Kingdom Hearts Recoded for the Nintendo DS, and especially notable for Mario Sports Mix for the Nintendo Wii, and unfortunately, that cannot be same applies for Kirby's Epic Yarn, sadly, because I was really excited to be able to actually just try out the game out, but I haven't got that enough money to be able to actually buy that game back in the day. But it wasn't until in the 11th of October in 2011 I finally managed to get the game, and I'm gonna say, I was so really very impressed with this game so far, even then. It's more different than any other Kirby games as far as I said this before, but even then I'll explain more on that later before we get to the next part, because as you can see, we're actually coming towards the forms of another transformation, as you can see there, which is buddy forms of the UFO. And what makes it very interesting is the fact that if you manage to able to suck up buddy forms of, let's just say 3 blocks or obstacles, or 3 projectiles, or even especially noticeable with these 3 enemies you can suck up with, you can able to actually just, as you can see, that the top portion of the UFOs decides to able to go a little bit more sparky looking, and then if you press the 1 button, you can actually manage to perform the forms of the electrical shock ability. Which, even then though, that could be very helpful though, especially noticeable if you want to proceed to the actual levels themselves. But in forms of, you actually coming towards the forms of those solid blocks, you cannot proceed them if you manage to able to fly with the UFO. And then all you have to do is basically we need to suck up buddy forms of not only obstacles but also enemies like 3 times until you're able to actually activate the actual electrical attack. And it could also suck up buddy forms of the actual beasts themselves as well, which is very useful though. But anyways though, we've now actually got ourselves the alarm clock patch, which even then though, this way you can actually unlock ourselves the another levels. But before we get into this, however though, oh dear, what a pickle, what a definite pickle I am in. Prince Fluff, Lord Kirby, you still here? Oh thank goodness, I ran into you. I am in the most dire of pickle strains. Could I possibly ask for your help? Thank you ever so much, Lord Kirby. Your generosity shall not go unnoticed. This means we're instantly transported to the forms of the actual, like, one of those flats, basically. So, you see, I can't seem to find anyone who wants to move into the new building here. it's a market, which is one to do. I think scratching the place up a bit would definitely attract some new attendees. I'm so glad to hear that you agreed. Now, take a look at this photo here. Okay, I got this. Could you do me a favor and decorate the room so it resembles this picture? Okay, since we've already got those two, yeah, wonderful, that was much easier than I expected. You chaps certainly are helpful. Well, I'm sure you'll find the furniture you need in areas you've already visited. So, since we've already got ourselves those two furnitures by the forms of the flower clock, and especially noticeable with the flower sofa, this means we'll go ahead and just select change layout, and able to actually place those two furnitures at the same time, and that way we can able to actually activate something a little bit more unique about it. And as soon as we're done with all that, then something else will happen. Wonderful job, Lord Kirby. Now, we must find someone who loves flowers. Hey, you got any rooms? Wow, flowers everywhere. I love this place. You did it, Lord Kirby. Oh, I can't tell you how grateful I am for this. Which basically is one of those things how the fact that if you manage to accomplish those specific objectives like this, you can actually anticipate by the forms of one of those friends challenges, very similar to how it does in Sonic Generations. Although, I will admit though right away though, I must be able to do that later down the road, because I'm not going to do them right about now, because we've only just got started throughout the entire adventure. So, we'll go back into the forms of Grassland, and we're actually going to be tossing by the forms of the alarm clock patch and able to discover cinematics about this. So here's the alarm clock is going hyping like crazy, and managed to wake up the forms of this particular somewhat of a bear vibe, and this way it actually unlocks Rainbow Falls. Not to be confused as one of those episodes in the forms of My Little Pony Friendship is Magic in Season 4. But I'll discuss more on that later, because for now, we got the endings off at this point here. So join me next time on Let's Play Kirby's Epic Yarn from the Nintendo Wii, is the fact that we're going to be taking on the next level in the game, Rainbow Falls. So see you guys next time. Later, fellas.